So full disclosure, when I started at Save the Bay, I had never heard of CRMC before.
Yep.
And I'm sure that I'm not alone. So could you give me the rundown?
CRMC, the Coastal Resources Management Council, is the agency that regulates activity along Rhode Island's coast. So those kinds of activities include aquaculture, the siting of wind energy facilities offshore, dock permits, marina expansions, hotel developments. Anything that's done on the coast has to win CRMC approval.
What could it look like if we didn't have a CRMC?
Without a CRMC, I think Narragansett Bay would have become an industrialized mess, and it would be kind of a Wild West for development on the coast.
What are some of the things that make CRMC different from other state agencies?
Like most state agencies, it has a staff, biologists, geologists, engineers, experts who know the impact of development on coastal resources. These are well-trained experts who know their stuff. What's different about CRMC is that above the staff in the structure is a council of 10 members, 9 of whom are appointed by the governor with the approval of the Senate. Unfortunately, they are not required to have any expertise whatsoever in coastal matters. So major decisions about what happens to the coast are left in the hands of this group of volunteers. That is problematic.
So you have experts on the staff, but these volunteer appointees on the council have more authority.
Yeah, in certain decisions, the 10-member council can override and does override staff recommendations on whether or not to allow certain kinds of activities on the coast.
The volunteer council isn't the only thing that's unusual about the structure of the agency right now, though.
Yeah, the council has a very peculiar structure, and it's been in practice for about 5 decades now. The council itself hires a private practice attorney to represent it. That attorney can have other clients and other interests, can engage in lobbying activities for other clients and other interests. The staff does not have a full-time attorney dedicated, focused on the business of the agency. So the staff itself is at a real deficit. It needs that legal support to do its work.
What are some of the situations in which legal support would be helpful or needed?
Well, I can think of one example in particular where in-house legal counsel, fully dedicated to the work of the staff, would have made a big difference, and that is in the Champlain's Marina case. Council members and their hired private practice attorney cooking a deal with Champlain's Marina to circumvent a decision that had been made by the council. And that action was so bad that it was overturned by the Rhode Island Supreme Court.
And legal counsel isn't the only thing that's missing from this strange setup with CRMC, right?
Yeah, another strange aspect of CRMC is that the agency is supposed to have a hearing officer to adjudicate disputes on permit applications and enforcement actions. A law that was passed more than 30 years ago required a hearing officer to be in place. The DEM has hearing officers for such situations. In this case, the council itself has been acting as judge and jury instead of an independent hearing officer. One has to wonder sort of what goes into certain council members' votes and decisions on what is allowed and what is not allowed. So by law, they're supposed to have a hearing officer. They do not. Governors going back decades have never appointed one, nor has the Assembly held governors accountable for appointing one. Last year, the General Assembly put money in the state budget for the appointment of a full-time hearing officer. Since that time, the governor has not filled that position as required by law, and the governor hasn't even posted that position. So we now have this vacant position that should be filled. So now we're just left with the politically appointed council to do all that work. The current structure is rife with conflicts of interest. It lacks transparency. There's a lack of consistency in decision-making. Were the staff left to its own devices and given the authority that normal state agency staff have, we would have a clear, more efficient predictable decision-making process. Making matters worse, there are 10 council seats, 9 appointed by the governor. 3 of those 9 are vacant right now. So a quorum of 6 is required for the council to even meet. And over the last several months, the council has had to cancel many meetings because they lack a quorum. So that slows everything down. That backs all the permit applications up, all the development proposals back up. One of the big questions about the council is, who are they accountable to? The governor appoints and the Senate approves, but then they are left to their own devices. So when controversial council decisions have been made, you never see a council member, the chairman or anyone else, stand up and explain the decision or defend it. And it's left to the executive director to clean up the mess sometimes, or in this case, the General Assembly needs to clean up the mess.
So when there's a misstep, nobody comes forward with a plan to prevent the issue from happening again?
That's correct. There's no explanation as to why the council acted the way it did. There's no accountability, there's no transparency, and there's no consistency in decision-making. Rhode Islanders need all of that to have confidence in their coastal agency.
Save the Bay would like to see some changes. What kinds of reforms is the organization looking to see?
There are 3 fundamental changes that need to be made. One is removing the council from the structure entirely and replacing it with a citizens advisory board that's made up of a well-represented cross-section of Bay communities, including environmental justice communities, including indigenous communities and others who should have a say in the way our coast is managed and developed. The second one is the appointment of a full-time staff attorney fully dedicated to the business of the agency, so things like Champlins don't happen again. The third one is the installation of a full-time hearing officer. If those measures are taken, Rhode Island will be well on its way to having a well-functioning agency that is worthy of the ocean state.
And we have the opportunity to do that this legislative session.
Fortunately, there are a set of bills pending in the 2023 session. House Bill 6034, sponsored by Representative Teresa Tanzi, and Senate Bill 772, sponsored by Senator Victoria Gu, embody these changes that we are seeking. And we really are urging the General Assembly to do full reform of the agency down. Your legislator needs to hear your voice. And to make your voice heard, visit savebay.org/advocacy.